The snow was already erasing the world when the story truly began, not falling so much as descending with intent, thick and endless, as if the sky had decided that memory itself was too heavy to bear. Rohi, 20 years old, her curly hair stiff with ice and grief, walked the narrow white path her people called the snow path, though no one ever walked it twice. Each step sank calf-deep into powder, each breath burned her lungs like a quiet punishment, yet she pressed forward because stopping had already been chosen for her. She had not been driven from her tribe with shouts or raised fists, that would have been easier. Instead, she had been given words, carefully spoken, ancient, weighted with tradition. The peace treaty with the white settlement was older than her name, older than her grandmother's songs. Under its law, a woman found in the company of a white man was considered a fracture in the world. Rohi had tried to speak. She always tried. She was the translator at the town school, the one who built bridges out of words, but no language could translate fear. They said she had betrayed them, revealed secrets to a cowboy, though the truth was smaller and braver, she had only helped save the life of an injured child. Truth does not always survive ceremony. Return by the snow path, the elders said. If you live, the spirits will have cleared you. And so she walked, not fleeing law or man, but the verdict of her own blood, while the storm closed around her like a held breath. Her legs failed long before her will. Rohi stumbled, caught herself on frozen air, then fell to her knees. The cold climbed into her bones with patience. Fever blurred the world into something distant and unreal. She thought of classroom chalk, of children's laughter, of a warm pot of stew she would never finish. Just as darkness leaned in, she saw a shape moving against the storm, impossible, yet real. Elias Crow, 30 years old, had lived his life listening more than speaking, and that habit saved him now. He heard the wrongness in the wind, a breath where none should be, and guided his horse toward it without knowing why. When he saw her collapsed in the snow, dark hair against white, something heavy and inevitable settled in his chest. She lifted her face, eyes glazed with fever, and whispered, "Please take me with you. I can't walk anymore." The words were not dramatic. They were final. Elias knew the town's rules, knew what she was by the cut of her cheekbones and the language in her eyes, knew the cost of touching her life. Yet his hands moved anyway, lifting her from the snow as if refusing her would end him. The storm swallowed their tracks as he turned his horse toward home, carrying a stranger who already felt like a decision he could not undo. By the time they reached the healer's cabin, Rohi was burning, heat pouring from her skin as if the storm had driven fire into her bones instead of cold. Her breaths came shallow, each one a small battle she fought even while unconscious. Martha Crow, Elias's aunt, opened the door before he could knock. Lantern light caught the silver in her hair and the knowing in her eyes. She took one look at the girl in his arms, at the blue tinge of her lips, the tremor in her thin body, and said nothing. In that resolute silence, Elias understood she would help, because Martha only wasted words on doubts she meant to entertain. The cabin filled with the smells of crushed herbs, boiling water, smoke, and old prayers whispered more with breath than sound. Elias stepped outside when told, standing in the thickening night while snow piled on his shoulders, his hat, his resolve, as if the world itself were trying to press him to his knees. Inside, Rohi spoke in her sleep, her voice breaking into a language Elias did not know, rising and falling like a wounded song. Though he could not understand the words, every syllable sounded like loss, like a home calling someone already gone. The sound reached him anyway, lodging behind his ribs. He waited in the snow because waiting was all that was left, and leaving felt unthinkable. When Martha finally emerged, boots crunching softly, she did not rush the news. She studied Elias for a long moment, measuring the man he had been against the man he was becoming, then said simply that the fever had broken. Elias nodded as if he had expected it, though his hands shook so badly he curled them into fists to hide it. Relief came not as joy but as sudden release, leaving him weak. He returned to his own cabin, lay fully clothed on the edge of his bed, and found sleep had abandoned him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face half buried in snow, lashes rimed with ice, lips moving around a plea that asked not for heroism, only mercy. He heard again the quiet certainty in her voice and felt the weight of having answered yes. Before dawn even considered breaking, he was back at his aunt's door, standing in the cold just to watch Rohi breathe, needing proof that choosing her had not been a dream the storm would reclaim. Morning arrived pale and sharp. Rohi woke slowly, confusion clouding her dark eyes, shame rushing in before memory could soften it. She tried to sit up too quickly when she saw Elias beside the bed, as if apologizing with her body for the trouble her existence caused. The movement made her sway. Without thinking, he steadied her with a hand that was careful, almost reverent. He told her his name quietly. When she repeated it, the sound shifted something inside him. She offered hers in return, Rohi, and the way she held it, like a truth she had learned to defend, stayed with him. Outside, the town whispered. Unease traveled faster than wine through thin walls and closed doors. Martha warned him gently, voice low and practical, speaking of consequences and safety. But Elias was already certain, if the town turned cruel, he would take Rohi far enough that fear could not find her. Some choices arrive fully formed and refuse negotiation. The cabin Elias brought her to sat at the edge of nowhere, snowbound, small, its windows glowing faintly against the white. Inside, the fire burned steady and patient. The silence was not empty but kind, wrapping around them like a held breath. Trust did not bloom. It crept, inch by inch, earned rather than assumed. Elias chopped wood each morning, the rhythm of the axe a promise of continuity. Rohi learned the sound of his footsteps, the pause before he entered a room so as not to startle her. He left space for her fear without naming it, she filled it with quiet courage. They spoke of small things first. The way weather changed its mind, the sound of children laughing without restraint, the comfort of books by firelight. In those fragments, something gentler than desire began to take shape, built on recognition. She taught him words from her language, sounds that flowed like water over stone, smiling softly when he stumbled. He taught her to read the sky for storms, pointing out subtle shifts in cloud and wind, his voice calm and grounding. Their hands brushed while passing a cup, then lingered longer than necessary, warmth blooming between their palms. Neither spoke of it, speaking would have broken the fragile truth they were building. For now, it was enough to feel it alive and waiting. The knock came anyway, sharp against the wood, cutting through the fragile peace. A summons to the town hall. Snow fell harder as they walked together, the world narrowing to the sound of their steps in unison. Rohi kept her eyes on the ground. Elias matched her pace without touching her, close enough to promise she was not alone. Inside the hall, warmth did nothing to soften the cold in the room. Faces closed like doors. Sheriff Thomas Hale stood rigid, law sitting on him like armor. His words were practiced, without cruelty, yet without mercy. She was not wanted. She must be removed. Her presence endangered a hard-won peace. Something inside Rohi gave way. Not loudly, but with quiet finality that hurt more than anger. She did not argue or plead. She simply turned and walked out, tears freezing on her cheeks, carrying exile like a second skin. Elias followed. Outside, the snow muted the town until it felt distant. The wind tugged at Rohi's shawl as if urging her onward. She wrapped her arms around herself, already bracing for another leaving. Elias stepped into her path, steady and undeniable. When he spoke, his voice did not rise. It settled, sure and unwavering. He would not let the town decide her worth. He would not watch her walk alone into another storm. He asked her to marry him, not in defiance, but in open truth where nothing was hidden. Rohi searched his face for doubt and found only resolve. She saw the weight he would carry, the whispers, the judgment, and love nearly made her refuse to spare him pain. Nearly. Fear argued sharply in her chest. Hope answered more quietly, more stubbornly. She nodded, trembling, tears falling freely, and whispered yes. The snow kept falling around them, gentle and constant, as if the sky itself were bearing witness. They returned at dawn for a simple ceremony held in the open, where nothing could be denied. Those who doubted stood stiff and silent. Those who understood said nothing at all. Elias spoke vows without flourish, promising presence, not possession, constancy, not control, his gaze never leaving her face. Rohi's voice shook at first, then steadied as she vowed endurance, kindness, and a love grown from survival rather than ease. When he kissed her, it was quiet but unmissable, a truth offered without apology. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Elias lifted her into his arms and carried her through the falling snow, past eyes that could not look away, toward the life they were claiming step by careful step. The cabin became hers through devotion rather than words. Elias built shelves for her books, fixed a window for more light, shaped the home around her presence as naturally as breathing. They danced by firelight in the evenings, slow and close, her head against his chest while the storm whispered outside. They cooked together, laughing softly when things burned or spilled, feeding each other with careful hands, learning marriage through touch and patience. Happiness arrived quietly, settling into corners like warmth afraid to be noticed and driven away. Perhaps it was right to be cautious, the sweetest things often survive only when held gently. The storm that took Jonah Hale did not ask permission. It arrived with teeth, swallowing sound and direction. When the sheriff's son vanished into the white, panic fractured the town. Rohi felt the pull immediately, a knowing deep in her bones, older than fear. She did not wait for approval. She wrapped herself against the cold and went, risk accepted as naturally as breath. Elias followed, fear sharp and focused, every step driven by the thought of losing her to the same storm that had nearly claimed her once. They found the boy crouched and frozen. Rohi gathered him with fierce tenderness and carried him back, footsteps steady even as the wind tore at her. When they returned, snow clinging like proof, the town finally saw what it had refused. Silence fell where judgment had lived. Apologies came haltingly, then fully, stripped of pride. The sheriff knelt in the snow, authority laid aside, words trembling with regret. Rohi stood before him, not triumphant, but whole, her dignity quiet and unbreakable. Acceptance did not erase the past, but it opened a door, letting light through. That evening, she and Elias decorated the cabin together, laughter soft and surprised, lantern light filling the small home with warmth that had nothing to do with fire. In his arms, Rohi whispered that with him she felt safe, that when he held her, the world no longer frightened her as it once had. Elias pressed his forehead to hers and promised what he had already been proving every day, as long as he breathed, she would never face the world alone. And if you listen closely when the snow falls just right and the world grows quiet, you might hear the lesson this story leaves behind. Home is not where you are born, nor where you are merely allowed to stay. Home is the place found in another's presence, where someone chooses you without fear, stands beside you without hesitation, and refuses, again and again, to let you walk alone into the storm.